to be flawed. To have my safety name. Keep it moving along. If you want that safety name. Cause I care less about your hate brain.
Look, up in the sky. It's a bird. It's a plane. It's just my dad. My dad. My dad.
Moving through the street with swagger and ease. Often works two jobs to take care of our needs. Taking it all in stride. Daddy seldom complains. His emotions so high. All his aches and pains stays up in his head about what must be done. Taking no time off. Daddy stays on the run. He's my dad and I love him. With him I have no fear. Because anytime I need him, I know Daddy's right here. Daddy's right here. Daddy seldom gets credit. We don't see all that he does. What's important to us is always showing Daddy love. His love sometimes tough to learn why it took a while. Our relationship special, one of Daddy's child. Facing his responsibilities, making it do what it do. Physically and emotionally available, yeah, Daddy's coming through. He's my daddy and I love him. With him I have no fear. Because anytime I need him, I know Daddy's right here. Daddy's right here. Nothing easy about fatherhood, protecting us from all the no good. Most of the time he gets it right. He'll usually seek the light. He'll take his problems to God. Sometimes we'll pray together. The most gracious, most merciful one with every storm will weather. He's my dad and I love him. With him I have no fear. Because anytime I need him, I know Daddy's right here. Daddy's right here. Daddy's right here. Here, 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 here. Yeah, Daddy's right here. And right here he is. Welcome to another live episode of Daddy's Right Here. Live. Yeah, I'm your host as always, Sabir Aleem, and welcome to another episode. Yeah, so glad to have you guys here this morning. As always, you can be doing anything else on a Saturday morning than sitting here listening to me. Yeah, you could be. And I appreciate you all being here for another episode. Uh, yeah, well, I guess, you know, There are a lot of things happening, you know, in this world, right? Especially abroad, things that are uh, going to have some kind of traumatic impact upon us, such as what life brings on a daily basis. And dealing with those things is individualized. Everybody doesn't experience things in the same capacity, no matter what it is. Everything is perceived differently, it's internalized different, whether it's death, whether it's conflict and confrontation, um, jobs, home life. When you're living with somebody else, it's always going to be a conflict of some sort, whether it projects outwardly or whether it's retained inwardly. It's always going to be some kind of conflict. It's another person, it's not you. But you really have to ask yourself, what if it is you? What if the conflicts that exist are really all yours because of expectations that you have of others? You don't live in the world by yourself. You can't avoid contact with anyone. Even if you don't talk to them, even if you don't engage them, there's still conflict. I have bags all up under my eyes, man. It's been a rough couple of weeks, y'all. Rough couple of weeks, but you can't avoid it. You'll see things, and if you didn't have the ability to see, you would still hear things because that's how you connect with the world around you, through hearing things. What if you couldn't hear? What then would you see? You would watch body language, right? You would see things before you and still make some kind of judgment of what it is you see before you. See, that's what's so deep about the human being. The human being internalizes things through every sense. Yeah. The eyes, the ears, the nose, the mouth, touch. That's how we connect with the world around us. So when we start looking at internal conflicts and we start looking at how it is we react to everything around us, we have to look at what senses are we using, and then what filters are those senses purging through, because it is a purging process of a sort. When you see it, it connects. The brain is sending signals. What did you hear? What did you see? What did you smell? What did you taste? And it's going through the mind, because the mind is where our true filters lie. We like to say think that we do things from the heart, right? But your heart can be sending one signal, but that signal still has to be connected to the brain. It still has to be connected to the mind, because that's where hurt comes from. That's where anger comes from. That's where your frustration comes from. Because if you're doing things out of pure kindness, because that's who you are, right? There's a reason why you're kind. There's a reason why. There's a reason why when someone is unkind to you, you react to it. There's an expectation there. There's a response that's grounded in the mind. The mind. So when we start looking at anger, we have to first ask ourselves, why are we angry? And it's easy to say because it's the other individual. It's easy to say that it's because of the circumstance. That's the easy part.
But if you keep relying solely upon that as your rationale, are you being rational or are you being irrational? Because when you're being irrational, then you have the mustitis, the can't standitis, the shoulditis. Those are the things that get us in trouble. Somebody should act this way. I can't stand when somebody acts that way. Sure, it'd be a good idea if people acted in a particular way that was unoffending to somebody else. But why are you offended? There are just some behaviors that we don't accept in society. The lewd and lascivious behaviors. We don't accept those things. Why would we? That's why they're titled as such. But when people are being themselves, they're trying to be themselves. And the only thing that they seem to get in response back from you or others is negativity. Then what does that reinforce within them about themselves? Because oftentimes we put people into spaces that they don't belong in. Most times it's because of a perception that we have formed about the person. And we have put this label on their forehead. So it's right here. Pain in the ass is coming over today. Yeah. Annoying is going to be at work today. And so on and so forth. We place these labels upon people. In our relationships with our significant others, what judgments have we formed about things that they do? And often people say, well, love, should be unconditional. No, love is not unconditional. There are conditions for one's love. Let's stop playing that game. It sounds real cute, but there are conditions. And the first condition is reciprocation. And we're talking solely about significant other relationships in this moment. Solely. If you and I are in a relationship, the expectation is reciprocating love. I love you, you love me. Reciprocate such. Love is an action word. It's an action word. It's not a definition of when we're together, this is what it is. It's love. It's not always love. And maybe your kind of love is just not the love for me. And that's where we really fall prey to a lot of our internal conflicts too, because of what we define as being love. It's just like saying mother, father. They identify the person. Mother is a woman. Father is a man. We know that. What makes you a woman? What makes me a man? Are we talking about our anatomy as defining us as such? Are we talking about roles, ascribed roles? Where did those roles come from? Who defined those roles? For you as a man and you as a woman, who defined them? Are we talking about scriptural definitions? Are we talking about the definition that the parents have given you? Or those that you learned in the street, in school, on the basketball court, in the yard? What? Same for love. Same for love. So when you love somebody, you've loved somebody, let's say in the past, it didn't go well. How did that affect your definition of love? Because there's an idea of love, and then there's an ideal of love. And when we look at an ideal love, it doesn't hurt from what we think, but love does hurt. Love does hurt. Intentional, unintentional. Love does hurt. And when it hurts, that's when we have the greatest difficulty. And it's usually because, again, of an expectation, a perception, a formed idea based off of past experiences. Each time you encounter this love, no matter who it comes from, the idea continues to be formed. You have friendship, love, someone you've been friends with, and y'all ride or die, right? Always together. Every time you see him, you see him. Every time you see her, you see her. You know, these friendships, and vice versa. You know, the friend is a female, you know, and you're a male, and vice versa. But at the end of the day, that's a different kind of love. Parental love, auntie, uncle love, right? There's a certain love that's formed, you know, in the workplace. You know, like when you, and it's really grounded in admiration, but we call it something else because of fear of calling it something because it can offend somebody. I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm not going to come home and tell my wife, "Oh, I love, you know, Miss Janet," because that could be misperceived, misunderstood, and then is it really appropriate? What I'm saying to you is that this is something that goes on inside of yourself, and there are just some things you don't say because of the inappropriateness that it may be perceived as, you know, by the recipient of that information. But it's love. You have a love for humanity. When you have a love for humanity, right? That helps explain that. But everybody doesn't have that understanding, that belief about love. So when we start looking at anger, you know, because last week we were talking about conflicts and how to resolve those conflicts, and I have to adjust that title before I publish this episode because this episode is about anger in relationships. So I'll change that. But when you look at anger, anger is not something that belongs to that outside of you. Anger belongs to that which resides within you. If I'm angry, does it have anything to do with the circumstance? Probably not. Probably not. A lot of times, anger is grounded in and unresolved about a particular matter. And let's say outside of the relationship, how you feel about the job that you do. You go to work every day, right? They call it work for a reason and not play. But you're not happy at the job. How do you internalize unhappiness? Because before we get to anger, there's phases to that. You don't just snap and get angry. Over time, these layers, and if you follow the shows, you'll hear me talk a lot about layers because as part of growth and development as a person is peeling the onion. You'll hear that term a lot used by people. There are layers to us. And as we begin to grow, as we pursue growth, we have to peel off layers of conditioning, bad information, misinformation, imposed upon conditioning. Because sometimes you don't have control over an environment that you live in, and you're getting all of this stuff that doesn't belong to you. And you're trying to protect yourself because the human being protects itself with unconsciously. Things happen, you get protected. You get protected. That's part of our one of our blessings as human beings that has been bestowed upon us. Right? Help is on the inside as well. See, when you start forming that alignment, you begin to learn that help is already inside of us. Right? We're conditioned as such. We were created as such in his image, in his likeness. So we already have it within us. It's already within us. And as you grow and develop and mature and find that alignment with the higher power, right, you begin to see how much you're in control of things. So when you have all of these relationships around you and you fall prey to your own unresolved, right? It's a battle that goes on, man. So you have to begin to go, you have to go back in order to go forward. You understand? And I was watching a movie and the woman said, it was The Exorcist, and the woman was talking about having to go back, to go forward. And she asked him, what direction are you going in? That's the whole thing. What direction are you going in? So oftentimes what happens is when we're faced with certain situations, we go back, unbeknownst to us. It's called rubber banding. Yeah, it's called rubber banding. It's a clinical term. We regress in the moment back to a period of difficulty. Some things we're faced with have to do with our childhood. So childhood trauma is important to look at. Childhood trauma is very important to look at because if you only go back as far as the last failed relationship, then you're still missing the point. And as long as you continue to miss the point, you're going to continue in this cycle of bad, failed relationships. You have to be learning about you, not about things that you won't accept, things you won't tolerate. But you have to think back to the things that happened in all of your relationships, not just the last one, because the last one, 9 times out of 10, is just like this one. It's just like the one before that last one. And you keep finding yourself in these kinds of relationships. Do you know how much anger is built up when you have failed relationship after relationship after relationship, and you keep saying it's them and it's not you? How angry do you think you are right now? Oh, I'm not talking about like you're sitting here, you're angry now, but how much stored anger do you have within you? And then every time you find the smallest things that become frustrating for you in this relationship, you react angrily, over the top. And then your partner's looking at you like, what is wrong with you? Did it really need that kind of response from you? Is that how you see me, that we can have this kind of interaction? No. So see, that's something I'm not going to accept. I'm not going to accept you coming at me with that kind of interaction when that's not who we are. That's not who we've been. Where is this coming from? And if the person is not willing to take a look at what's being presented right now by them to you, then it's a good chance that relationship is either on its way or at the point of failure. You know, a lot of times good people get pushed out of your life, get pushed out of our lives because of the unresolved that we have, because we don't want to look at ourselves, because it's easier to associate this behavior in this relationship with past relationships. And instead of you working on why you kept being at odds with this person about, things that weren't even relevant to the growth and development of the relationship, it was just your stuff. Until you get to the point of seeing that, you're going to have the same relationship over and over again. Or you're going to stay in the relationship that you're in and continue that cycle and develop some level of complacency where you just don't leave. Because y'all are good with going back and forth at one another. That's your comfort zone. That's your baseline. You have to change the baseline if that relationship is going to improve. It's not going to improve if you don't change the baseline. And baseline is where your level of functioning is. That's the baseline. So if our baseline is we argue and fight and don't speak for periods of time, right? And then we make up. That's our baseline. That's our baseline. That's how we function. That's how we operate. And that's why a lot of people don't get involved in relationship issues when it comes to domestic violence, because we intervene, right? We talk to both parties, or we defend the abused by assaulting the abuser, only to find them right back together hours, days, weeks later. And you sitting there shaking your head like, I went through all of that. We went through all of this. And you still there? Because empowerment wasn't given to the abused in the way that it needed to be. You just intervened in the conflict. You just intervened in the physical aspect, but you have no idea why that person remains. And telling a person to leave over and over and over again is not going to be the answer, because they're going to be right back. They're going to be right back until they learn some things about themselves, their own stuff, right? Because that could be grounded in anger too. They're the only person who's ever stood by me. They're the only person who's ever done this for me. This is the only person who's ever helped me when I need help. And as much as I'm going through, I know that they're going to be the only ones there. Because you'll get this person out of the situation, you'll move them somewhere else, and after a few days and weeks, maybe months, you disappear. You go back to where you've been. Had you been there before, it may have been a different outcome. And because the person interpreted as such, right? They feel like, okay, well, y'all don't help. Y'all don't even call. Now everybody wants to show up at the hospital after he done put his hands on me again, or after she done put her hands on me again. So it's a whole lot of things that you have to start looking at in terms of these layers of why you be responding to things the way that you do. It's a burden that you're putting upon yourself. You're going to get pain. Suffering is optional. Making others suffer is optional. It's optional. You have an option to either get angry, snap out, spaz out, flip, trip, whatever you want to call it. You have that option. But how much energy does that take from you? And how much damage does it do to the relationship? You can't take back what you said. You can never take it back. Apologies don't take back what comes out of your mouth. It just doesn't. It changes the course of the relationship. So if you think that you can keep saying, my bad, I'm sorry, my fault, I was going through something, you can't keep saying that. Because we're supposed to be ace spoon couples. And again, look at the expectation of the relationship. My expectation is that something going on, tell me what's going on. If I said something that was sideways, tell me. You know why? Because I know I can say things sideways out of my mouth. I know I can get in spaces where I'm in my head about things, and I can be short. I know that. I know that about me. Not in denial about it. And I will recognize. You know what? I'm sorry. I was in this space. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. I mean, I'm not a person who is verbally abusive. I used to be, because of my own interpretation and my own layers of conditioning throughout the years because of the lifestyle, right? And I started peeling that off and I started shaking off the void and I start growing up and maturing and recognizing the hurt that my mouth had caused and is capable of causing. See, I'm good with who I am, right? I'm good with who I am. I'm an open book. And when you know who you are and you're willing to make adjustments, that makes things all the much better. You're not going to listen to what I'm saying to you. You will never be free of your trauma. You will never be free of it. But you have to learn how to manage that trauma. It's not always as you see it. It's as it has become within you. And you have to do something about it. So with anger, there are stages before you get there. Hey, Jill Banks. There are stages before you get there. There had already been things happening. And there was no resolve to those things. So now you're in a position where, like, it takes courage to have to recognize that chat on. It takes courage to recognize that it's me. It takes even more courage to stand down in situations where you would usually turn up. It takes courage to do that. Because sometimes if you stand down, you feel like you just got chumped. You made yourself vulnerable. You just submitted to a situation. And submission, I have found, is a great difficulty for a lot of women. And the response to that is usually, well, it's no good men out there. No, you keep selecting. I keep selecting the wrong partners because of my perception. I used to see the slimiest dudes, right? The slimiest dudes with what I perceived as being good women. But then I'm looking at, why are you with him? But when you get a dude like me who come along, the nice guy, you want to stomp all over my feelings. Like I don't even exist. But this dude who do you dirty, who you know is dirty, you see it's dirt, that's what you want. And then you wonder why you got that dude. Then you want to talk bad about him. But you saw the dirt. You thought a bath or a shower was going to change that? You thought a little something was going to change that? Come on, man. So you have to look at you. Because if you think that you are that bad, that you can change another person, listen, we need to talk. Because I've been in the field of human and social services for 30 years. And I can tell you that I can only give you the information. And you use the information to improve your way of living. That's all I can do. I guide you towards self-discovery. I guide you toward understanding the subject matter. But you got a lot of people out there that just want to, that believe that they can change somebody. My children's mother told me that. Like when years later after I shook off the boy, we were talking and I said, I was a bum when you met me, pretty much. I didn't own nothing. Yeah, I had a job. I was in the street hustling. I was a bum. No sense of responsibility. Took no ownership for nothing that I did. Nothing that came out of my mouth. Her response to me was, yeah, but I saw the talent. You were just so talented. And I'm saying to myself, I was no good. And I'm all right with telling you that. I was no good. You have to understand yourself. You have to be honest with yourself before you can be honest with others. I was straight about the street. I was straight about the hustle. Nothing else mattered. And here's the funny part. I say that, but they all matter. Every girl, woman I was involved with mattered. They all mattered. If I was involved, I tried to make sure I did whatever I could to help, whether it was bills, whether it was taking you somewhere, doing this and doing that. But I was on course, right, for a different lifestyle. So it didn't include staying around real long. But when we connected, I made sure things were right. But I wasn't about responsible living. So I know what irresponsible living looks like, and I know what responsible living looks like. It's a choice, just like anger. Anger is a choice. You know what anger does to you. You know what it feels like when you're angry. You know what you do when you get angry. You know what comes out of your mouth when you can't. No, I didn't mean to say that. That's not what I meant. No, that is what you meant. That is what you meant. You said it because you didn't resolve it within yourself. Because it wouldn't have came out your mouth if you didn't think it. If you didn't think it. So let's go to this article. Because y'all know I get on the roll. And 4 tips on managing anger in a relationship. Article on Psychology Today by Boris Herzberg. Right? Learn to express anger in constructive ways to turn it into a positive force. The article. Many couples hesitate to show anger, fearful that this negative emotion will damage their relationship. Yet, to inhibit anger in a relationship is unhealthy because it's a naturally arising emotion. Listen to the statement. It's a naturally arising emotion. It's natural. The human being does so many things naturally that we're not paying attention to what's happening, right? And then because it's a naturally arising emotion, some take and they run away with that. It's like weed. Oh, that's grown, man. God put that there for us, right? So we can smoke it. But there's a responsibility that comes along with that, right? And that's the part that's often missed, the responsibility, the outcomes, the negative outcomes, of long-term usage or even short-term usage, depending on what your conditions are. You might have some pre-existing medical condition that you know nothing about. You may be smoking some stuff that came from Joe's backyard, and Joe got a gas station across the street from him that's been there for about 10 years. And all the residue that creeped over into that. Yeah. But it's just like the anger. It's a naturally arising emotion, and when unmanaged can be destructive. Right? Back to the article. It's very important to digress here and mention that uncontrollable anger can be dangerous and lead to physical and emotional abuse. That is why safety comes first. Nonetheless, in any relationship, right, you'll have to deal with a certain amount of anger, which, if addressed properly, will not escalate and fuel unnecessary flames. So let's see how we can deal with anger within a relationship, right? And again, if a person is repeatedly apologetic for their bad behavior because they don't know how to express their anger, right? You don't have to continue to accept it. You just don't. You just don't. You have the right to walk away from that relationship. That's a right that you have, and you need to exercise your right in some cases. When you have an instance, because some things are isolated, some things are patterned, and some things are pervasive. And you need to be able to see, is this an isolated incident Is there a pattern of behavior that we need to have addressed? Right? And sometimes you have to understand, and this is where, black folks, differ. We don't use counseling. We don't like going to family counseling. We don't like going to couples counseling. We don't like going to individual counseling to address our stuff. We keep going to us for the solution when it's us who is the problem, right? Then you have to look at is if it's pervasive. Is this how a person reacts to everything that differs from their beliefs and values? Every time you come into something, well, no, I don't agree with that. It's an argument. That shows, for one thing, that a person is not willing to compromise. They're not willing to see and understand from your perspective. That means that the value of you is not where it should be. My value for anybody who is in my life, especially my woman, my girlfriend, my wife, is that I'm supposed to listen to them. I'm supposed to understand them. I'm supposed to learn about their likes and dislikes so I don't continue to tread in that area with irresponsible action. You understand what I'm saying? With irresponsible actions. We can't grow if I don't know. And I have to come to understand. I need to learn who you are. What makes you tick? What makes you explode? Right? So back to the article. Number one, don't suppress anger, but make sure it's manageable. Suppressing anger is not a healthy or effective strategy for dealing with it. Anger should be expressed, but it should be manageable. If anger completely overtakes you and overwhelms the conversation, it's damaging to your relationship. And you are not actually expressing it. It might seem counterintuitive, as it's when the anger is at its peak that we want to direct it at our partner or another family member in an attempt to be understood. However, this is exactly the time when your partner will be most hurt by it. So, before you express your anger, make sure it's manageable. That is, you be ready to talk, not only by means of it, but also about it. About it, right? You need to take a walk. Choose your time. The battle doesn't have to happen right now. This is the worst time. If you're that angry and you know how you act when you get angry, or you know the negative impact that anger will have in a situation, go to work, go to school, go to Walmart, wherever you want to go shopping at a store, walk it off, take it down a notch, right? Pump your brakes, and then come back and talk about it, right? And it's always a good thing to ask for permission to have this conversation. Babe, you think we can talk for a minute? And they may tell you, no, not right now, because of how you reacted. And you have to accept that. You have to accept that, right? Because your unmanaged anger just triggered something in me. Remember, I got my stuff too. I'm saying to myself, how dare you? You talking to me like I'm some dude from the street. I'm your man. I'm your husband. I'm main man. I'm dude. You talking to me like, oh, I don't deserve that. So you got to understand these things, right? Especially if it's a repeated behavior, especially if it's something that you often do. You need to accept that, but you ask for permission. Okay, can we talk now? And the right thing for the other person to do is to be honest. Say, hey, listen, how about we talk later on, maybe after dinner? Right now, I'm just not in space to have a conversation. And you don't have to go into, well, because you pissed me off. You have to go into all that. Listen, I'd rather we do this later because right now I'm just not in that space. And it is not time for you to say, oh, well, when you. Happens in a lot of relationships. Again, so you have to look at that behavior. What is that behavior? It's controlling. It's controlling behavior. And I guarantee you, if that behavior is pervasive or is pattern, this relationship is already in trouble. And it's just a matter of, if she does this one more time, if he does this one more time. But how did the previous times affect the dynamics? See, it's dynamics like this that cause people to gravitate towards someone other than you. They call it infidelity. But sometimes that's what we seek is resolved. So instead of putting yourself in that position where, you deeply hurt somebody else, but especially yourself, because you made that choice to reach out to somebody else who you thought was going to be better than the one you're currently with. It's temporary. It's putting a band-aid on the bullet wound. Especially if you truly love that person, but you just want them to get it right. And we do dummy stuff like that. We do. Things ain't right there, and somebody else that you're more familiar with. And I always talk about the workplace environment. The workplace environment is the danger zone. It ain't the club. It ain't the bar. It's the workplace. I'm there 40 plus hours a week. How often do I see Bob? How often do I see Janet? Right? How much interaction do I have with them? Is my interaction with them better than it is with you? Because at some point, you see them as neutral. You see them as neutral. They see you in another capacity. Just think, two hurt people, two people who are having difficulties in their relationships, right? Find each other in the workplace. We start having conversations. They, disclose things to you. Why am I disclosing this to you? Right? Because I've developed some level of a fondness, a level of comfort with you. Yeah. Totally oblivious to the game. Because there are predators out there. They look for that damage. Look, coming in, and they watch you because they like you. They feeling you a little bit. And they see you sashaying up the hallway. And that sachet just turns into a sway. It's like it's almost a dance. Right? It's almost like a dance. And then they see a change in you. And they ask you, how you doing? You seem to be a little off today. And no, I'm good. And after a few of those, no, I'm good, it turns into something else. And before you know it, pressed up against the wall. But you got to be careful of those kind of things, because this is how relationships. And for those who don't go that route, what route do you go? What do you do? Do you start spending more hours at work because you just don't want to be home? Do you start going, seeing other friends, family members, just being other places other than home? How is that going to affect the relationship? You got to confront it. You got to gain control of that emotion. And you got to talk about it if you truly want a relationship. Number 2, acknowledge the presence of anger and its origin. You don't have to talk with your partner when they are angry, as peak anger doesn't bring resolution. Anger is usually met with more anger, and the emotional atmosphere escalates. Of course, anger also doesn't have to be met with softness. After all, it's an unpleasant feeling, and it belongs to the person who is angry. However, anger should be acknowledged. It can be acknowledged in 2 ways. One is spelling out the emotion. I see that you are angry, or for the person who's angry, I am angry now. The second is to understand and acknowledge what frets your partner, the source of anger. The source of anger cannot always be eliminated, but it's important that your partner is aware that you know something is wrong for them and how they feel is important to you. Often, anger is a secondary emotion concealing deeper feelings. When someone wants attention, they might be more angry. Children do that sometimes. That's why I talked about shaking off the boy, right? If they break something, it's the fastest way to get their parents' attention, right? So, what do you do to get attention? A constructive way of approaching anger would be to talk through anger by asking and trying to genuinely understand what makes your partner angry. Then you can work it out together. Vice versa, let the partner know what angers you and make sure he or she acknowledges that. You don't have to accommodate anger. That doesn't allow dialogue. And you don't have to meet anger immediately or give solutions to stop it. But sooner or later, its roots need to be acknowledged. Right? And again, we've been talking about this. You have to acknowledge your anger. You have to express the fact that you're angry, to your partner. And this is and what often happens is, see, when you don't talk, when you don't just take those opportunities to just, you're sitting on the patio, your little rocking chair, with your little taste on the table, and you're chilling. That's the time to talk about those things. A lot of times people are confused. They say, well, that's not the time we supposed to be chilling and yada, yada, yada. Okay, so when you want to talk? And a lot of times people don't talk until there's something upon them. There's a conflict or a confrontation upon them. Then they want to talk. And then they can't talk with any rational thinking because it's a matter of you're oblivious all this time and then it just comes out that this is what's happening. Right? And I found that a lot of times it can be to one's detriment when you're like when you're like me, who I'm an open book. I disclose anything to you. Well, not anything. You don't need to know about my serial killer, years and one kid. But it's just some things, eventually you become okay with, talking about those kind of things. But you should always be, letting the person know who you are, your hurts, your pains, your aches, your difficulties, your challenges. We always focus on what we like. We always want to focus on this is what you enjoy, and the partner is always trying to give you those things that you enjoy. We avoid the difficult areas. We avoid the hurt, the pain, uh, the stuff that we're carrying around with us that we've carried around for years, our unresolved. We don't have those discussions. And when you don't have those discussions, you really can't say that you're having a relationship that is going to be long lasting because it's only going to be short lived. It's not going to be true. It's going to be superficial. Uh, Ain't gonna work because you don't want to free yourself of the stuff that you carry. You don't. You want to continue to hold on to it. Why? And you have to ask yourself that. Why do you continue to hold on to it? And number 3, practice saying no to establish boundaries and prevent anger. Yeah. Many couples think that saying no angers their partners, and thus they try to avoid using it. However, the opposite is true. Anger arises when you can't say no. Practicing no is very important as it's a natural expression of boundaries. Again, there's that word natural expression. Natural. We avoid we avoid establishing clear boundaries for fear of that person losing us. I mean, of us losing that person. Yeah. If I say no, it's not going to be a good outcome. She's going to get angry with me. She's going to Find somebody else who will, because we hear that kind of stuff in your life. You don't do it, somebody else will. Yeah. And we begin to believe it, especially when we have it happen. If you had that happen in your life, you know what I'm saying? Then that's part of your unresolved that you need to get resolved, because it triggers within you. I'm going to go before this happens. I'm cutting this off now, right? Uh, when partners learn to say no, there are beautiful things growing around it. As both partners outline the zone where they don't want to go and are starting to see the common ground in the zone that allows them to meet. No in a relationship is a good starting point for negotiation, not for turning the partner around, but for trying to understand what the partner doesn't want in order to outline expectations and then talk about them. It took me 4 marriages to learn how to say no. Yeah, yeah. Four. These weren't short term at all. One was even 16 years. Um, because I'm a very accommodating person, I'm a nurturing person, um, an enabler. So I'm a recovering enabler, right? Because, I found where those things got me by not saying no, by always saying, all right, babe, I got you. Don't worry about it. Even owning some of your stuff. Yeah. Owning some of your stuff, downplaying my own emotions and my own thoughts and values and beliefs about that particular thing, just because I didn't want you to hurt. And all the while, I'm being hurt. All the while, I'm hurting. And you're living, enjoying this hunky dory life in spite of, right? So I learned to say no. That's it. No. I mean, each one of them ended with me saying no. But if I was saying no and establishing those very clear boundaries ahead of time, right, they wouldn't have been as long as they were. I guarantee you. And this is another show I'm going to do on that. What happens when only one partner is in the fight? Because that happens a lot. You're the only one fighting to save it. You're the only one making the adjustments. You're the only one giving your all and not just, limiting what you're willing to give. How the hell can you be in a relationship with somebody, call it a damn relationships, but you're shirking your responsibilities, your duties? How do you call yourself being in a relationship? Selfish. Selfish. You can't be almost pregnant. You're either in it or you're not in it. Plain and simple. So I had to learn the hard way. The important thing is I learned. That's what's important. So no matter how long you've been in this position, no matter how many relationships that you've been in, right? That you've been much like me in being the one who doesn't set that clear boundary, who's always accommodating, who's always making sure you're cared for and that you feel love. I can't make you feel love in that capacity. If you don't see what I'm doing with you, for us, then you're not going to see it. You're not going to see it because you're too selfish to see it. And we have to accept that. So although they all ended, and I got to the point of saying, no, that's it. That's it. But in the last one, right, it was like it was just so much. It was too much that I lost myself. It took me 2 years to get back in alignment. To get back in alignment. And now I know how to say no. And fortunately or unfortunately, right, the current one has to, and this happens in all of lives, the current person is the one who gets that. And as painful as it may seem, right? You have to have boundaries. The other person doesn't understand that, and they won't understand that if you don't have those intermittent conversations about where you've been. See, that's the key part, right? Because you also have to understand where they're at, right? Because if they haven't gotten to that point of understanding the significance of establishing clear boundaries, not just this, I ain't letting no man this. If that's not necessarily a boundary. That's an interpretation of past events that you have conditioned yourself to stand by. Anytime you're in a relationship with somebody and they're saying stuff like, "Well, I'm not letting no man do this," or "I'm not letting no woman do this," that's a double red flag because that means you're going to constantly be at odds. And more than likely, that's not going to be isolated behavior. It's not going to be pattern behavior. It's going to be pervasive behavior. It's going to exist in every area where they feel like they don't want to do a thing. Run. Run as fast as you can. Don't put energy, effort, and your spirit into it. Run. Well, we are at the hour. Um, uh, we're at the hour. We got one more tip on here, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to wrap this one up. I'm not going to take it to next week because it's just one. Number 4 on this list is making anger the starting point for change by turning it constructive. Even though anger gets a bad rap, it can be a good starting point for change. Anger is a sign that an individual no longer wants to put up with something they don't like. Thus, anger can be very constructive. It can mobilize you for something useful and mobilize you as a couple for a joint change. After all, anger serves as an indicator that something needs to change and are no longer tolerated by the person who experiences this emotion. Constructive anger gives a lot of power and energy. It can help one gather and direct force into something new. It converts irritation into doing. The key is to transform destructive anger into constructive energy, facilitating new changes in life. You have to use it in a constructive manner. If I have committed to you in any capacity, whether you're my significant other, whether you're a business partner, whether we homies, whatever the case is, right? It's a commitment in that relationship to some degree. Each one has their own guidelines, parameters, right? On the street, it's don't snitch. We homies, we ride or die. This is how it's supposed to be. You don't snitch, right? That means that there's a responsibility that I have to have if you're putting me in harm's way. That I need to tell you that, right? I need to tell you that. Yo, don't. This is what we don't do. If this ain't what's supposed to be the end all, this can't happen. You can't just put me in harm's way when you feel like it. I don't have to partake in everything. I don't have to do all of these things, right? There's just some things you don't do. You see police officers, law enforcement, right? When their partners do dirty, they got to carry that stuff, and then they have to stick with the commitment of the blue wall of silence. But hey, I'm riding with you. You put me in harm's way. You put my family in harm's way. You put my career in harm's way because you want to do dirty. Then you want to use the blue code of silence, right? We work together. I don't want to see you lose your job, right? But what you're doing is wrong. I'm not going to sit back and just see you violate somebody's rights, violate a patient's rights, violate an inmate's rights. because of your attitude and your vibe towards that particular person or the environment itself. I mean, I got to sit there, I got to see you do that, or I got to sit there and see you do random acts of kindness that violates the patient counselor relationship. You giving them candy and potato chips and stuff during group. We're not supposed to do that, but you do it right in front of me, right? You gotta. Hey, no, you don't do that around me. If that's what you're gonna do, don't do it around me, because I have an obligation. I'm credentialed. All that person got to say, oh yeah, Sabir was there. Sabir was where? Oh, you gonna tell me you didn't see such and such? See, you put me in a position of losing my credentials. I got a 30-year career. I'm not gonna throw that away for you, and so on and so forth, right? And I don't have to give you the outline of a significant other relationship, because don't go out there and do stuff in the street that's going to compromise our family, that's going to compromise our relationship in any capacity. In any capacity. You shouldn't have made that decision on your own. Yeah, I get it that you're the man of the house, you're the king of the castle and all that stuff, but you made the decision that affects us all. That should have been discussed with me. You just have to look at the anger and what the person is angry about, what they're angry about. Like, okay, so yeah, you know what? I was wrong, and I'm sorry I affected you that way. I didn't pay attention to how it was going to affect you. I did it out of selfishness for myself, my own thinking. See, when you start taking ownership for what you do, and you start listening to the person, and you start parroting back what it is they're saying to you, right? That's a sign that you're understanding. Now, action comes along with that, obviously, but it's the admission. It's the admission that's important. Hey, listen, we are at that hour, man, and I am, thankful again, for you guys still supporting me. After all these years, I've been doing this Daddy's Right Here thing since 2000. Graduated from Lincoln 2006. Yeah, because Daddy's Right Here was formed off of my thesis project while at Lincoln University, right? And I just took it from there. I established a foundation there where Daddy's Right Here is going to be. I want to see fathers improve the relationships between them and the mother of their children and or the children, right? Because we always get the short end of the stick, right? We always get the short end of the stick. We live in that kind of society where both, it's really funny, not funny like ha, but it's funny how males, when it comes to family, are pushed out of the family life, and then we live in a country whereas that the woman, the very one who they pushed us away from, who could help, how little respect she is given in the workplace, in this country, right? And in a lot of venues, and so it's a lot of religions that ostracize in so many ways, that silence the word, the voice of a woman, right? This is a sick society, so we have to really take a look at ourselves, and how we don't allow a system to control what we do with each other, because this system has done a lot in splintering the family, a lot, and they continue to do that. We're at the hour, and as always, I'm your host, Sabir Aleem. Thank you for tuning in to the show. It's the little one's trying to get over here, and she can't get past the barrier, so she's upset right now. She wants to see Daddy. Why? Because Daddy's right here. Thanks for tuning in. They're in front of the camera, setting bait, media.
media propaganda places their just renegade. They're waving to the crowd, spewing empty promises. The applause is loud, damn, you still fall for this. It's a dog and pony show, threatening the woke. Donkeys and elephants, a three-ring circus, rope to go. They've lured us in, hook, line, and sinker. They only want followers, not independent thinkers. Political leaders, sweet bottom feeders, men who are on their faces are two-tone. Political leaders, sweet bottom feeders, men who are on their faces are two-tone. Their faces are two-tone. Up and away, superheroes to many, saviors for some, a taker from any. They appear distinguished, no 1%'s toys. Their souls extinguished, their minds destroyed. For you against you, all with the same breath. With us against us, it's a loyalty litmus test. Patriotism, dictator, confusion. Schizoid prison, it's a democracy illusion. Political leaders, sweet bottom feeders, men who are on their faces are two-tone. Political leaders, sweet bottom feeders, men who are on their faces are two-tone. Their faces are two-tone. Their faces are two-tone. Yeah, their faces are two-tone. They call it a chamber, believers of the manger. In God they trust not, falling angel, no stranger. In it till they die, from their seats they will cry. To our faces telling lies, they're complicit, no surprise. The ceiling is high, they think the same of you and I. What they call woke is a politicized form of divide. All lives no matter, just listen to the idle chatter. They're hiding in plain sight because they fear the smoke and splatter. Political leaders, sweet bottom feeders, men who are on their faces are two-tone. Political leaders, sweet bottom feeders, men who are on their faces are two-tone. Their faces are two-tone. The body count is growing from the propaganda that's sowing. They're hiding the hand, want to keep you not knowing. Peace seems to come through war, but war doesn't bring peace. Residual effects are an intermittent release. They bet you'll be called, then they'll call one for you. Presenting arms as though they adore you. They're journalistic in nature, maturation missed. They turn the other cheek and receive the Judas kiss. Political leaders, sweet bottom feeders, men who are on their faces are two-tone. Political leaders, sweet bottom feeders, men who are on their faces are two-tone. Their faces are two-tone.
Once again, I'm your host as always, Sabir Aleem, and I will see you next week, 9 a.m. Another episode of Daddy's right here live. Have a great day. Peace.